We're just over a month away from Election Day, but votes in important battleground states are already being cast. According to the U.S. Election Project, more than 1 million people have already voted in the 2020 general election, mostly from Wisconsin, Virginia, and North Carolina. That's still less than 1% of the more than 138 million votes cast in the 2016 election. CBS News' latest Battleground Tracker shows the race is tightening in two important states. President Trump has seen gains in Georgia, where he leads by just 1 point. Joe Biden was leading Mr. Trump by 1 point this summer. The president is also improving in North Carolina, having cut Joe Biden's lead in half to 2 points. CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins me now to break down what we've learned in these states. Hi there, Anthony. Great to see you. So you looked at how the Supreme Court fight is impacting voters' views. What did you learn there?
We did, Elaine. Good to talk to you. And I'm glad you mentioned those numbers at the top. Folks should remember, I think most of the ballots in this election will be cast before November 3rd. So it's really important. We'll talk about that. Let me first take you to the voters, how they feel about that Supreme Court nomination. And let me show you here that a majority feel like it's made the election even more important than they already thought it was. And you might say, well, people already thought it was important. How much more room did they have? This is affective. This is people feeling like it's added to the stakes, as if they could add any more to what's going on here. So we find that. And then we did find the split, very partisan in this, about who should be making the pick for the court. Democrats feeling like it should wait to see the winner of the election. Republicans feeling that Donald Trump should make the pick now. And so we get big dramatic splits on that. And then finally, I want to put it in context. As important as the Supreme Court is to people, don't forget about things like the economy, about things like health care, both of which outrank the Supreme Court in these states, and of course, coronavirus and handling that outbreak too. So in context, it's important, but so are a number of other issues heading into that debate, Elaine.
Yeah, it might be surprising, Anthony, to some people that Georgia is in play. What are the keys to watch for in the polls and on election night?
Yeah, I am glad you asked. Let me take you into Georgia, which, if you see on our Battleground Tracker map, we have rated as a toss-up. This is a state, I'll remind folks, the president won pretty comfortably last time in 2016. It tells a broader story. It tells a story of a fast-growing region, one that's demographically changing. We see this a lot throughout the South, and it also tells a story of places that were hit by coronavirus, where a lot of voters felt like the Trump administration didn't help that matter. Well, when we look inside Georgia, this is something I want people to keep in mind. We'll do this for every state as we head into the election. The regions within the state. You break it down this way. The red areas that I'm pointing to here in the north and in the south, much more Republican. But then that demographic change I was talking about, you're really going to focus in and around this region here, the Atlanta suburbs, okay? These are places where the Democrats are going to try to swing a lot of that suburban vote, suburban college degree holding women. And in our polling, you see this white area means that they're in toss-up status right now, and that blue area means Joe Biden is doing very well. So you start to break down the state that way, and we'll do this again on election night, and that's how you start to look at Georgia. That balance adds up, Elaine, to a very, very tight race.
Really interesting. So we've seen small shifts in the polling in North Carolina, Anthony. The race got a little tighter. What makes the polls shift? Are people changing their minds?
Well, I'm glad you asked that too, Elaine. Let me take you inside North Carolina. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring up our scenarios board. And I'm going to give you one example of the kind of thing that can make a poll shift, and then carrying forward what can make an election shift. Let me look at African-American turnout, which we talk about as being one of the important components in a state like North Carolina. Well, at the moment, our poll has that at them being 22% of the electorate. Now, let's suppose, and I can just move this a little bit just to make a hypothetical example here, what if that African-American turnout falls to 19%? Well, look over here. Now I've got a tied race. It was up by 2, Biden up by 2. Now that race is tied. So that's what shifts both the election end the poll. Now, if that turnout were to go even higher, let me bring it up all the way here to 25%. Now Joe Biden starts to pull away with it. He does very well in areas around like Charlotte, in areas around Raleigh-Durham, and then that adds to a statewide lead. That's one example to answer your question of why a state can swing, what can make polls move as pollsters haggle over just what exactly each percent of the electorate is, and those small shifts can make a big difference, especially in a tight race, Elaine.
Finally, in our few minutes that we have left, Anthony, voting is already underway. A number of states have already begun mail-in voting. Will we get any sense of how those ballots are going ahead of the election?
Yes, we will. I'm going to take you over to this slide just as an example from North Carolina. When we talk to people and ask them how they're planning to vote, you see over 4 in 10, both Republicans and Democrats, planning to vote in person early, before November 3rd. That's part of that big number you and I mentioned at the top. But then there's a really interesting political dynamic I want to point out, and that is this difference here, this 40 over here, this 17 for Republicans who plan to vote by mail or absentee. Democrats, and we're seeing this in the numbers as the Secretary of State reports them out from North Carolina, Democrats are requesting more mail ballots and casting more mail ballots. We will have a sense of that based on party registration, not necessarily knowing how people are going to vote. We can poll those people in advance, and we will, and ask them how they voted. So yes, we will have a rough sense of how the election is trending. Then you get to Election Day, and you see who shows up in person. Republicans have turned out very heavily at the polls on Election Day in the past, and they may have to do it again, and they can do it again, and that could be the thing that swings a state like this, Elaine.
A lot of variables this year. Anthony Salvanto for us. Always great to have you, Anthony. Thank you.